My father was never the kind of man to complain, but one night he walked out of his bedroom with a lost look in his eyes like a kid who had forgotten where he was. "Son," he whispered, "I don't know what's happening. I keep waking up at 3 a.m. every night, like something's pulling me out of sleep." I started noticing the dark circles under his eyes. His knees began to ache. His memory got fuzzier, and some mornings he couldn't even get out of bed because of the dizziness. People said it was just aging. But here's the truth that chilled me. Chronic sleep loss can silently raise the risk of dementia and even take away your ability to walk. This isn't just fatigue. This is the body slowly losing its ability to heal night by night, cell by cell. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a son who watched his father nearly lose his mobility. And that moment sent me searching for hope. Not in prescriptions, but in the kitchen. Today, I want to share with you 7 simple yet powerful foods, the very ones that helped my father sleep through the night for the first time in over 15 years. And if you or someone you love has ever stared at the ceiling in the dark, exhausted, but wide awake, I hope this video brings you something meaningful. Let's begin with the first food, a soft golden fruit we've all tasted, yet may have never truly understood: the banana. Part 1. Bananas and dormant memories. I still remember that night vividly. My father was sitting on an old wooden chair by the window, elbows resting on his knees, hands cradling his forehead. The clock ticked softly in the background. Outside, the night was quiet, but inside his mind, it felt like a storm was raging, waves of thoughts crashing and flashes of memories rushing by, a constant sense of falling with no end. "Son," he said quietly, "I don't know why. I keep waking up around 3 in the morning. My eyes are closed, but my brain feels like it's on a train I can't get off of." His hands were cold. His voice was tired, not just from lack of rest, but from losing something deeper: his connection to sleep itself. It wasn't insomnia in the usual sense. It was something harder to describe: the body forgetting how to let go, how to descend into stillness. That night, I knew this wasn't just about being tired. Something inside him had unraveled. And what surprised us both was that the turning point came from something as simple as a banana. It started small. A single ripe banana in the evening. He didn't expect much, neither did I. But night after night, something began to shift. Why a banana? It's a fruit so familiar we hardly give it a second thought. But inside that soft, sweet yellow skin is a trio of nutrients that quietly support the body's natural sleep rhythm: magnesium, potassium, and vitamin B6. Magnesium helps relax muscles and calm the central nervous system. Potassium supports nerve function and regulates heart rhythm. Vitamin B6 plays a key role in converting tryptophan, an amino acid, into serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter that fosters a sense of calm. And serotonin in turn becomes melatonin, the hormone that gently tells your brain it's time to sleep. Here's the thing: sleep isn't something you can force. It's not a switch you flip. It's a response, a natural return to balance when the body feels safe, supported, and at ease. And real food, in the right form and at the right time, can offer that support. There's a small study from Taiwan that tracked older adults struggling with chronic sleep issues. After eating a banana 60 minutes before bedtime for 4 weeks, most participants reported sleeping more deeply and waking less often. It wasn't a magic cure, but it was a gentle nudge, a signal that the body could relearn what it had forgotten. One of the most touching stories I came across was from a retired nurse named Rosa. At 65, she had long given up on uninterrupted sleep. She would wake 4 or 5 times each night, sometimes from leg cramps, sometimes for no clear reason at all. A nutritionist suggested she try eating one ripe banana in the evening, preferably with brown speckles. She laughed at the idea at first, but after a few days, she began to notice the twitches stopped, and by the second week, she stayed asleep longer. "I still wake up sometimes," she told me, "but I don't panic anymore. I just drift back like I used to." One fascinating detail few people know is that the banana peel, yes, the part we throw away, is actually richer in tryptophan and magnesium than the flesh. In some parts of South America and Southeast Asia, people brew banana peel tea by boiling the clean peel for 10 minutes with a cinnamon stick and a bit of honey. It's earthy, soothing, and deeply rooted in traditional practices. While it may sound strange, it's a gentle reminder that nature often hides its treasures in plain sight. Now, to be fair, not every expert agrees on how effective dietary tryptophan is. Some researchers argue that tryptophan has a hard time crossing the blood-brain barrier because it competes with other amino acids. But there's an interesting workaround when tryptophan is consumed alongside a small amount of complex carbohydrates, like oats, or even a drizzle of honey. It can more easily enter the brain. Carbs trigger insulin, which clears away the competing amino acids from the bloodstream, giving tryptophan a clearer path. That's why something as simple as a banana oat smoothie at night can do more than satisfy your hunger. It can help prime your brain for natural melatonin production. No pills, no side effects, just cooperation with your own biology. Of course, there are common mistakes people make. For instance, eating bananas that are too green. While green bananas are rich in resistant starch and good for digestion, they may be harder to process at night and can sometimes lead to bloating in sensitive individuals. The best stage for sleep support is when the banana is fully ripe with a few brown spots, soft to the touch, easy to digest. Another mistake is eating too late when the stomach is already full or agitated. Food, even when beneficial, should never feel like a burden. It should be a gentle signal, a familiar ritual that whispers to your body, "It's time to rest now." I remember the third night my father tried it. He still woke at 3 a.m., but instead of the usual jolt of panic, he simply lay there, stared at the ceiling for a moment, and closed his eyes again. The 5th night, he woke just once. The 7th night, not at all. He said it felt like he'd rediscovered a door he thought had been permanently locked. Sometimes healing begins not with medication or treatment plans, but with small, consistent acts of care. A banana at bedtime might seem too simple, too ordinary. But in a world that constantly rushes us, simplicity can be revolutionary. This was just the first step for my father. A fruit that reminded his nervous system how to pause. But the real journey of restoring sleep didn't end there. To keep the mind from waking in panic, to shield the body from the racing thoughts and tension that sabotage our nights, we needed something more, a quiet protector working in the background. In the next chapter, I'll share a tiny but mighty food that holds that role. It's not flashy, it doesn't make headlines, but for many people, it's been the difference between a restless night and real rest. Let me tell you about almonds. Part 2. Almonds, the quiet guardians of sleep. A small handful, a soft crunch, and yet, in that quiet moment, your body begins to remember how to feel safe again. After the banana started helping my father fall asleep more gently, I began noticing something else. He would still wake up, not often, but sometimes. And when he did, he couldn't always explain why. His mind wasn't racing. His legs didn't twitch. He wasn't in pain. But somewhere beneath the surface, something felt unsettled, almost as if a subtle alarm was going off deep inside him, nudging him awake. That's when I learned that falling asleep is only half the story. The real challenge is staying asleep, especially during the early morning hours, when cortisol, the body's stress hormone, begins to rise in preparation for the day. We don't often think of food as something that can calm the nervous system hours after we've eaten it. But almonds do something rather special. I began offering my father a small handful of almonds each night, not many, maybe 6 or 7, around an hour before bed. At first, it felt like a nice snack, something comforting. But over time, it became part of the ritual, that familiar, grounding crunch, the warmth that followed. Almonds are rich in magnesium, a mineral that often flies under the radar. But magnesium acts like nature's dimmer switch for the nervous system. It supports GABA-A, gamma aminobutyric acid, the brain's primary calming neurotransmitter. GABA helps slow brain waves, quiet mental chatter, and ease the body into the deeper phases of sleep. Low magnesium levels have been linked to fragmented sleep and even anxiety. In fact, a 2012 randomized clinical trial published in the Journal of Research in Medical Sciences found that elderly adults who took magnesium supplements slept longer with fewer awakenings and felt more refreshed in the morning. But what surprised me most was something few people talk about. Magnesium alone isn't enough if your body is dealing with inflammation or cortisol surges. And almonds help here too. They're rich in vitamin E, a powerful antioxidant. And here's the key: oxidative stress, especially chronic low-grade inflammation, can subtly disturb the brain's ability to enter and maintain deep sleep. When your body is constantly fighting internal fires, it stays alert, even while you're lying still. Another insight I learned came late one evening while speaking to a sleep specialist. He said, "You know those people who wake up between 2 and 4 a.m. and say they feel a little wired or even hungry. That's often not anxiety. That's a blood sugar dip. It turns out that almonds contain healthy fats and protein, which helps stabilize blood glucose during the night. They prevent those silent drops in energy that trigger the brain's early warning system, waking you up to go find fuel." It made so much sense. My father didn't need more sleep aids. He needed steady energy, calm nerves, and a body that didn't feel threatened in the middle of the night. There was one night that really stayed with me. He had gone to bed later than usual and forgot the almonds. At around 2:30 a.m., I heard his footsteps in the hallway. I got up, found him in the kitchen, and he looked surprised to see me. "I don't know why I'm up," he said. "I'm not stressed. I just feel off." He paused, then added, "I forgot the almonds." We both laughed, but it wasn't a joke. From that day on, we experimented raw almonds, soaked almonds, which remove certain anti-nutrients that may interfere with mineral absorption. Homemade almond milk warmed on the stove with a pinch of cinnamon. He liked that version best. It reminded him of the spiced milk his mother used to make when he was a boy. There's something beautifully symbolic about that. Sometimes comfort isn't about sleep at all. It's about remembering what safety feels like. There's also a fascinating truth about habitual wakefulness. The more often you wake at a certain time, the more your brain expects it. You begin to train your nervous system unintentionally to be alert at 3 a.m. Almonds, by supporting deeper, more continuous sleep, help disrupt that faulty cycle. Over time, the body begins to forget the habit of waking and learns again how to stay at rest. Of course, not everyone will respond the same way. Some people may need to adjust the portion size or eat them earlier to avoid indigestion. And those with nut allergies should obviously avoid them altogether. But for many, almonds offer something that modern sleep solutions don't: gentle reinforcement of the body's natural rhythms without dependency or artificial sedation. There's one more thing that struck me during my research, something small but unforgettable. Almond trees bloom in early spring. In some cultures, they represent renewal and clarity. The idea that something as quiet and steady as a tree could symbolize awakening made me smile. Because maybe sleep isn't just about rest. Maybe it's also the beginning of something brighter. My father now sleeps more deeply. When he wakes up, he doesn't feel foggy. His balance is steadier. His mind is clearer. He says his dreams have returned, and that might be my favorite part of all. Still, almonds, like bananas, are just one piece of the puzzle. They help stabilize, ground, protect. But sometimes, what the body truly needs is a reset, a way to restore its inner clock when it's lost its rhythm. That reset, surprisingly, might come in the form of something small, round, and red. A fruit you may have eaten all your life, without realizing it, carries the chemical key to unlocking your sleep schedule. In the next chapter, I'll share the story of cherries and how they quietly help the brain find its way back to nightfall. Part 3. Cherries. The sleep. Reset in ruby red. Sometimes the smallest fruits carry the most ancient wisdom. In each red drop, the body finds its rhythm again. I'll never forget the night my father looked out the window at 7:45 p.m. and said, "I feel sleepy already." It had been weeks since he'd said that, and he wasn't forcing it. His body had quietly decided it was time to rest. That shift didn't happen all at once. But something changed when we began adding a handful of cherries to his evening ritual. At first, it was almost by accident. I'd read a few lines in an article: tart cherries contain melatonin. I didn't think much of it. But then I came across a study from the University of Northumbria in the UK. It showed that participants who drank tart cherry juice twice a day for 7 days increased their sleep time by up to 90 minutes and experienced improved sleep quality overall. It stopped me in my tracks because Here's something I hadn't fully understood before. Melatonin isn't just a hormone, it's a timekeeper. It doesn't make you sleepy. It tells your brain when to start preparing for rest. And as we age, our natural melatonin production declines sometimes drastically. That's when I realized that my father didn't just need to feel tired. He needed his internal clock, his circadian rhythm, to remember what time it was. Cherries especially. Montmorency tart cherries contain natural melatonin, not a supplement, not synthetic. The real food-based compound that your pineal gland produces when it senses darkness. So I bought a bag of frozen tart cherries. Every evening after dinner, I'd thaw a handful, mix them with a bit of plain yogurt and cinnamon, and let my father enjoy them slowly. The taste was tangy, slightly sweet, and strangely comforting. He didn't say anything the first few nights, but on the fourth evening, he looked up from his bowl and said, "You know, this reminds me of summer when I was little. We had a tree in the back garden." That memory stuck with me. Because sleep, I've come to believe, is more than a biological process. It's deeply emotional. To truly let go, the body needs not only biochemistry, but also a sense of safety, of nostalgia, of grounding. Cherries gave him that. Beyond melatonin, cherries are rich in anthocyanins, the pigments that give them their red color. These compounds act as potent antioxidants and anti-inflammatories, especially in the brain. That's important because silent inflammation in the nervous system has been linked to poor sleep quality, cognitive decline, and even mood disorders. What's more, studies show that consuming cherries may reduce C-reactive protein CRP, a marker of inflammation, which often peaks in people with chronic sleep disturbances. But one of the most curious things I learned was this. In traditional Chinese medicine, cherries are considered a blood tonic, used to build vitality, support the heart, and anchor the spirit. That concept struck me, not just because it sounded poetic, but because it aligned with what I was seeing in real life. My father wasn't just sleeping more, he was smiling more. His mind was clearer in the morning. He said he no longer felt like a shadow of himself. Of course, not all cherries are created equal. Tart cherries like Montmorency or Balaton have the highest concentration of melatonin. Sweet cherries contain less, and dried cherries, while tasty, often have added sugars that can spike blood glucose and disrupt sleep if eaten too late. We kept it simple: frozen tart cherries, sometimes mixed with almond milk or oats for a soothing bedtime bowl. It became part of the ritual, part of the message we were sending to the body. The day is over. You are safe now. It's time to let go. One evening, I tried the cherries myself. I had been sleeping poorly, not out of stress, but because my mind was always on. I didn't expect much. But that night, something happened. Around 9:30 p.m., I noticed my breath had slowed. My shoulders had dropped. I hadn't even realized how tightly I'd been holding myself. I fell asleep, without realizing it, the way I used to as a child, reading under the covers with a flashlight. That night taught me something. Sleep is not an achievement. It's a return. A return to rhythm, to stillness, to the quiet inside you that's been waiting patiently all day to be heard. There's an insight here I think we often miss. Many people who struggle with sleep think their problem is falling asleep. But for countless others, especially older adults, the issue is timing. Their bodies don't know when it's time to power down. Screen stress and inconsistent routines confuse the signal. The sunset no longer triggers rest. That's where cherries shine. They don't knock you out. They nudge your internal clock back into alignment. That's not a magic bullet. It takes consistency. It takes presence. But for many, it's a better path than over-relying on sedatives that suppress the brain's natural rhythm rather than restoring it. Of course, you should always check with your doctor, especially if you're on medications that affect serotonin or melatonin metabolism. This video isn't medical advice. I'm just a son watching the man who raised me start to return to himself. One fruit at a time. After a few weeks of cherries in the evening, my father's sleep became more predictable. But more than that, his mornings changed. He didn't shuffle to the kitchen with glassy eyes. He stood straighter. He joked more. He remembered things I'd said 2 days earlier. It felt like he'd come home to himself. Still, there were moments, especially during seasonal changes, when sleep would wobble again. The shorter days of winter. The longer evenings of summer. Light affects the brain in powerful ways. But one fruit helped to smooth that transition, anchoring the body in moments of change. Bright green, tangy, fuzzy. A fruit that looks like a joke, but carries a serious punch when it comes to sleep. Next, I want to tell you about kiwis, the strange little protectors of the night that might just help your brain feel safe again. Part 4. Kiwi, the green guide to rest. It looks like a fruit from another planet, but inside kiwi carries the instructions your body may have forgotten on how to sleep deeply, naturally, and with ease. There's a kind of loneliness that settles in when sleep becomes unreliable. Not just for the person lying awake in the dark, but for those who love them, who watch from the other side of the hallway helpless. After weeks of slow improvement, my father's sleep was better, but not consistent. Some nights, he'd drift off and wake at sunrise, refreshed. Other nights, he'd turn in bed for hours, unable to descend into that first layer of rest. It reminded me of those half-lit moments just before dawn, not quite night, not quite morning, when the world feels suspended. That's when I came across kiwi. Of all the foods I researched, kiwi surprised me the most. It didn't seem like a typical sleep food. It's tart fuzzy and often tossed into fruit salads without a second thought. But what lay beneath that bright green flesh was something extraordinary. A study published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Clinical Nutrition followed 24 adults with sleep disturbances. For 4 weeks, they ate 2 kiwis 1 hour before bed each night. The results: participants fell asleep 42%, faster, slept longer, and woke up less often. Those numbers stunned me, and they weren't from pills, powders, or devices, just 2 pieces of fruit. So I bought some, ripe, slightly soft, with that strange little crown at the top. My father raised his eyebrows when I handed him 2 and said, "Trust me." We cut them in half, scooped them out with a spoon, and sat quietly as we ate. There was something playful about it. The sweetness, the tang, the way the seeds crunched lightly between our teeth. The first few nights, not much changed. But by the end of the first week, he said something I hadn't heard in months. I didn't even notice myself falling asleep last night. That's the thing about sleep. You're not supposed to notice it. When it's working, it's invisible, like gravity or the heartbeat. But when it breaks, it's all you can feel. Kiwi works in a few fascinating ways. First, it's one of the richest natural sources of serotonin, the neurotransmitter that not only lifts mood, but also serves as the direct precursor to melatonin. Think of serotonin as the guide. It lights the path, helps you wind down, stabilizes your emotions, and then gently hands the baton to melatonin, which whispers, "Let's sleep now." But kiwi doesn't stop there. It's also packed with vitamin C and vitamin E, both antioxidants that reduce oxidative stress in the brain. And that matters because high levels of oxidative stress are like static in the nervous system. They make it harder for the brain to reach the deep, restorative phases of sleep. Ever wake up feeling heavy-headed, slightly irritable, or confused, even after a full 8 hours? That may not be a lack of sleep, but a lack of quality sleep. Without enough deep and REM phases, the brain doesn't clear toxins, process memory, or reset emotional balance. That's what kiwi helps support, not by sedating you, but by creating the internal environment where real sleep can happen. There was one night, I remember it clearly, when I heard my father quietly humming to himself in the kitchen. He had eaten his 2 kiwis, made some chamomile tea, and sat by the window watching the sky fade from blue to indigo. "It's a good tired," he told me. "Like I worked just enough, but not too much." There's a truth in that feeling that no medication can simulate. One strange fact about kiwis: the skin is edible, and it's actually more nutritious than the flesh. It contains 3 times more fiber and a higher concentration of antioxidants. We began washing them gently and eating them whole like small fuzzy apples. At first it felt odd, but over time we grew used to the texture and the results. The fiber in the skin also supports gut health, which, as it turns out, is deeply connected to sleep. The gut produces more than 90% of the body's serotonin, and it communicates with the brain via the vagus nerve in what scientists now call the gut-brain axis. When your gut is inflamed, sluggish, or imbalanced, your brain suffers. Sleep suffers. Emotions wobble. Kiwi, in its whole form, nourishes this entire system quietly, consistently, without fanfare. There is one caveat. Some people, especially those with latex allergies, may be sensitive to compounds in kiwi. Always listen to your body. If tingling or irritation occurs in your mouth or throat, it's best to avoid or consult a physician. For most people, though, kiwi is incredibly well tolerated, and when paired with something like half a banana or a spoonful of oats, its sleep-supporting effects seem to increase. We even began making a warm smoothie, kiwi banana, oat milk, a pinch of nutmeg, light enough not to burden the stomach, but rich enough to feel like a treat. It became our nightly rhythm, a green glow before the dark. One night my father turned to me after finishing his smoothie and said, "I don't know if it's the fruit or the routine or just being with you, but I feel like something in me is repairing." That sentence stayed with me, because here's the deeper insight. Sleep isn't only about what we take in. It's about what we release. The fears, the overstimulation, the tension of holding it all together during the day. Kiwi to me became a symbol of that release. It didn't force anything. It simply provided the nutrients, the timing, the cue. The rest happened naturally. After a few weeks, we noticed that seasonal transitions, which used to throw his sleep off, became smoother. His body seemed more flexible, more able to adapt, less stuck. But just when things were falling into place, we discovered something unexpected. A food that could be either a helper or a saboteur, depending on how and when it was used. Not a fruit, not a grain. A strange little fermented food that lives in the shadows of the fridge and in the gray zone between nourishment and disruption. In the next chapter, I'll share what we learned about sauerkraut and how this sour food taught us a sweet lesson about balance. Part 5. Sauerkraut, a double-edged ferment. It's tangy, it's alive, and if you're not careful, it can either lull you into deeper rest or steal your sleep altogether. The first time I opened a jar of sauerkraut in front of my father, he winced. "You want me to eat that before bed?" He wasn't wrong to hesitate. Sauerkraut smells like something your body might naturally reject pungent sour alive in a way that feels unpredictable. But by then, we'd come to understand something important. Not all sleep problems are about the brain. Sometimes the culprit is much lower. Sometimes it's the gut. For years, my father had subtle digestive issues. He didn't think much of a little bloating after meals, occasional indigestion, the feeling of being off but not quite sick. It wasn't severe, but over time, I realized it was part of a larger puzzle. Because digestion and sleep are not separate processes, they are deeply intertwined. And sauerkraut, that humble heap of fermented cabbage, turned out to be one of the most powerful tools we'd encountered, if we used it right. What makes sauerkraut special isn't just the cabbage. It's the living microbes, the naturally occurring lactobacillus and bifidobacterium strains that flourish during fermentation. These probiotic bacteria support the gut microbiome, reduce inflammation, and most intriguingly, influence the production of neurotransmitters like GABA and serotonin. Remember how serotonin is a precursor to melatonin? Well, most serotonin is made in the gut, and when the gut is inflamed or out of balance, serotonin production plummets. Your body may still feel tired, but it can't make the chemicals that signal sleep. So yes, a few spoonfuls of sauerkraut eaten at the right time can help restore the gut-brain connection and improve sleep quality over time. But here's where it gets complicated. The first night my father tried it, we made a mistake. He ate sauerkraut at 8:30 p.m., right after a protein-heavy dinner that included beef and cheese. Within an hour, he was uncomfortable. His stomach gurgled. He felt warm and a little itchy. He went to bed early, but tossed and turned until nearly 2 a.m. The next morning, he looked at me and said, "That food messed me up." At first, I thought he was just being sensitive. But after doing more research, I found the missing piece: histamine sensitivity. Fermented foods like sauerkraut are high in histamines, natural compounds that in small amounts regulate immune response and digestion. But in sensitive individuals, or when combined with other histamine-rich foods like wine, aged cheese, chocolate, and processed meats, they can disrupt sleep, trigger skin reactions, or cause headaches. That night, we'd accidentally created a histamine cocktail, and my father paid the price. So we tried again carefully. This time, he ate just 2 tablespoons of raw and pasteurized sauerkraut at 6:30 p.m., alongside a small bowl of warm brown rice. No heavy protein, no cheese, just clean, simple carbs to buffer the acidity. The difference remarkable. His stomach was calm. His body felt warm but not flushed, and he reported feeling settled as he went to bed. Not sedated, just settled. That's the insight I wish more people knew. It's not just about what you eat. It's when, how, and with what. The same food that heals you at one time can harm you at another. There's a beautiful simplicity in sauerkraut. It's just cabbage and salt. But through the alchemy of time and patience, it becomes a living ecosystem, one that can transform the inner landscape of your gut, and by extension, your mind. We began making our own. We'd slice fresh green cabbage, thinly massage it with sea salt until it wept, and pack it into a sterilized jar. Within days, tiny bubbles would rise, proof that life was blooming inside. Each batch was a kind of ritual, a lesson in slowness, and a reminder that healing often comes from cultivating what already exists rather than forcing something new. My father took to it more than I expected. He began looking forward to his small portion of kraut, not as a medicine, but as a quiet signal to his body. We're done eating. We're entering rest. One night, we tried pairing it with a small bowl of steel-cut oats. No sugar, just cinnamon and a drizzle of almond milk. The warmth of the oats and the brightness of the kraut balanced each other in a strange, satisfying way. He slept deeply that night, and the next, and the next. But we never forgot the lesson sauerkraut is not neutral. It can calm the gut or agitate it. It can nurture neurotransmitters or disrupt them. It is truly a double-edged ferment. Another unexpected discovery. Sauerkraut is rich in vitamin C, which lowers cortisol, the stress hormone that spikes early in the morning and often wakes people prematurely. In that way, kraut served as a kind of preventative buffer, helping my father's body stay in rest mode a little longer. However, we also learned to avoid combining sauerkraut with iron supplements at dinner. Vitamin C increases iron absorption, and excess iron in the bloodstream may interfere with melatonin synthesis. If he took his supplements too close to his evening kraut, his sleep suffered, so we spaced it out. Kraut with dinner, supplements at lunch. The balance was delicate but real. That's what made sauerkraut different from everything else on the list. It wasn't a straightforward eat this and sleep better food. It was a teacher, one that forced us to slow down, pay attention, and tune into the nuances of digestion, timing, and sensitivity. Some nights, my father would skip it by intuition, not fear. And that taught me something too. Sleep isn't just about adding things. It's about learning what your body needs and when it doesn't. After a few weeks, he no longer needed kraut every night. Just occasionally, when his stomach felt off or his sleep started slipping. It became a tool, not a crutch. The next chapter of our journey took us to something simpler, warmer, familiar. A bowl you'd expect to eat in the morning, not at night. But when prepared the right way, it became the softest landing place for his tired mind. Let me tell you what happened when we discovered oatmeal before bed. Part 6. Oatmeal. The gentle weight of night. Sometimes sleep comes not from silence, but from softness. And in one warm bowl, we found a kind of quiet neither of us had felt in years. I grew up thinking oatmeal was a morning food, something hearty, wholesome, reliable. My father used to make it for me when I was a kid, stirring it slowly with a wooden spoon, humming some song I didn't recognize. We'd eat it at the table in silence, just the two of us, and the steam rising gently from our bowls. So, when someone first mentioned oatmeal as a sleep aid, I blinked. Oatmeal before bed. It felt backwards. But we'd already learned that healing doesn't always follow the path you expect. At this point, my father's sleep had improved somewhat. He could fall asleep more easily thanks to the bananas, kiwis, and almonds, and his gut felt more balanced, especially after we figured out how to use sauerkraut properly. But something was still missing. A kind of emotional weight, if that makes sense. He'd wake in the middle of the night and feel untethered, not anxious, not sick, just empty, as if his body had dropped out of sleep because it had nothing left to hold on to. I realized what he needed wasn't another stimulant or sedative. He needed something grounding, and that's what oatmeal became. We started simple. Half a cup of rolled oats cooked slowly in warm oat milk, a pinch of cinnamon, a teaspoon of almond butter. Sometimes a few mashed banana slices stirred in, or a sprinkle of chopped walnuts. No sugar, just warmth, just softness. He ate it slowly, holding the bowl in his hands like it was something sacred. That night, he didn't wake at 3 a.m. And when he rose in the morning, he said, "I feel like I slept under something, not just through something." It was the perfect description. Because sleep isn't just about turning off. It's about sinking in. And for some people, especially those with sensitive nervous systems, the body needs help feeling heavy enough to stay grounded. Oatmeal helps in so many ways. First, it contains complex carbohydrates which release glucose slowly over time. That steady trickle of energy prevents the body from dipping into a low blood sugar state, one of the most common reasons people wake between 2 and 4 a.m., feeling wired or weirdly alert. It also contains magnesium and zinc, two minerals that support melatonin synthesis. Without them, the brain can't complete the chain of chemical signals required for deep sleep. But what really surprised me was something I'd never heard before. Oats contain a unique compound called avenin, a mild, naturally occurring peptide that has gentle sedative properties. It's not a knockout punch. It's a soft exhale. The kind of compound that says to the brain, "You're safe now. You can slow down." I did more research and found a small observational study from Japan that suggested regular oat consumption before bedtime was associated with longer periods of slow-wave sleep, the deepest, most restorative kind. That's the sleep that clears waste from the brain, strengthens memory, and repairs muscles and tissues. My father started looking forward to it. Not just the sleep, but the ritual, the smell of cinnamon in the air, the warmth in his palms, the way his breathing slowed even before the last bite. Some nights, we'd blend it into a smoothie instead, banana oats, oat milk, a dash of nutmeg. Cold, creamy, easier on summer nights. He liked both. But we noticed something else too. If he ate it too late, say right before getting into bed, it sometimes made him feel too full. Heavy in the wrong way, So we adjusted the timing, an hour before bed, not after 9 p.m. That seemed to work best. That small adjustment made all the difference. Because digestion is part of sleep too. When the stomach is calm, the brain can release control. When the blood sugar is steady, the body doesn't sound the alarm. There's one more piece that's worth mentioning. When oats are combined with healthy fats like those from almonds or flax seeds, their glycemic load becomes even more stable. That means fewer insulin spikes, fewer crashes, fewer panicked wake-ups. And when combined with warmth, something as simple as hot milk, they trigger a deep-seated sense of security, a return to infancy, to being held, to being fed and safe and soothed. One night my father finished his bowl, looked down at the spoon, and said, "I think this reminds my body that it doesn't have to fight." That line undid me, because most of us don't realize how much we're still fighting when we lie down. Fighting thoughts, fighting the day, fighting the body that won't settle. And sometimes we just need to give the body something to hold, a soft anchor, a gentle weight. Oatmeal became that for us, not every night, but most. And on the nights we skipped it, I noticed a difference. He didn't sleep worse necessarily, but he slept lighter, more prone to waking, more likely to dream unsettled dreams. So we kept it in rotation. Not as a cure, but as a comfort. A way of saying, you did enough today. You can let go now. There's one more thing I want to share about oats, something most people miss. They don't act like sleeping pills. They don't knock you out. What they do is create a physiological and emotional environment that invites rest. That's very different. If you eat oatmeal mindlessly while scrolling your phone or watching late-night news, you might miss the signal it's trying to send. But if you eat it slowly in a quiet space, with soft lights, or maybe even music, it becomes something more. It becomes a message. After a few weeks, my father's sleep had become fuller. Not perfect, but full. He still had hard days, still had stress, but sleep no longer broke under the weight of those things. And as I watched him reclaim the simple joy of waking up and feeling ready, I felt something shift in myself too. But our journey wasn't done, because there was one final piece. Not food exactly, but something older, gentler, a ritual in a cup, a way of ending the day, not with answers, but with acceptance. Let me tell you what happened when we discovered chamomile done right. Part 7. Chamomile, the tender healer. It's not a tea. Not really. It's a ritual, a whisper from the past, a way to say, you can stop now. My father once told me he didn't like tea. Too weak, he said. Too watery. Not enough substance. He was a coffee man, strong and bitter and unbothered by caffeine, even late at night, or so he thought. But when we began this journey, I started asking questions I'd never asked before, not just about food, but about rhythm. What did his body need to hear in order to fall asleep? That's when chamomile returned to my mind, a name I hadn't thought about since childhood, when my grandmother used to brew it with a little honey on rainy days. She never called it sleep tea. She just said, it helps the heart be quiet. I didn't tell my father that right away. I just brewed a cup, properly. Because here's the thing, no one really tells you chamomile only works when you treat it with care. Most people dip a paper tea bag into boiling water for a minute or two, get a pale yellow cup, and wonder why nothing happens. But chamomile isn't about speed, it's about patience. So I found dried whole chamomile flowers, not crushed leaves, not dust, whole round blossoms with soft golden centers. I brought water to a near boil, then let it sit for a minute, cooling just slightly, because boiling water can damage the fragile oils that make chamomile powerful. Then I poured it slowly over the flowers in a glass cup, covered it with a saucer, and let it steep for 10 minutes. The result: a rich golden infusion that smelled like wild meadows and honeyed sunlight. I brought it to my father without a word. He sniffed, raised one eyebrow, then took a sip. He didn't say much, but he finished the whole cup. That night, he didn't fall asleep faster. That's not what chamomile does. What happened was quieter, more invisible. He unwound. I watched him as he sat by the window. Shoulders lower, breath slower. Fingers not tapping on the chair the way they used to when he was thinking. It was like the cup of tea gave him permission not to sleep, but to let go. Over the next few weeks, we made it a practice. Around 8:30 p.m., the lights would go soft. Phones went away. A gentle song played in the background, and I'd brew the tea slow and deliberate, the way you might prepare something sacred. Chamomile's magic comes from a compound called apigenin, a natural flavonoid that binds to the same receptors in the brain that some anti-anxiety medications target, but without the heavy side effects, without the sedation. Apigenin tells the nervous system, "You're okay. You can stop defending." In a 2016 clinical trial published in Phytomedicine, adults with chronic insomnia who took chamomile extract fell asleep faster and experienced less nighttime waking compared to those who didn't. But what I found even more compelling was this chamomile isn't addictive. There's no rebound effect, no dependence, just a gradual deepening of rest night after night when used consistently. One night, I experimented. I added a few dried passion flower petals to the chamomile and a slice of fresh ginger. My father said it was the best cup he'd ever had. He smiled after finishing it, eyes softer, voice lower. He didn't ask for dessert that night. He didn't reach for his phone. He just sat still. Sometimes, that's all healing is, the return of stillness. There was one evening I remember more than any other. The power had gone out during a storm. We lit a candle, sat in the dimness, and drank our tea with rain tapping on the windows. My father said, "This feels like when I was a boy." Then he paused. I think I forgot how much I needed this. That night, he slept 10 hours straight. There's something tender and ancient about chamomile. It doesn't push. It doesn't pull. It waits. It meets you wherever you are, and it invites you to soften. Of all the things we tried, bananas, almonds, cherries, oats, chamomile was the last note in the symphony. Not the strongest, but the most necessary. Because while the others fed the body, chamomile fed the ritual. It told his nervous system, this is the end of the day, not with force, not with control, but with grace. And over time, the body began to remember. Sleep returned, not as a response to effort, but as a natural rhythm, like breath, like tide. I've come to believe that the most powerful part of chamomile isn't even the flower, it's the space it creates. In a world that demands productivity, stimulation, constant attention, a single steaming cup, sipped slowly, in silence, becomes a rebellion. A soft one, but powerful nonetheless. Of course, not everyone responds the same way. Some people need to steep longer. Others prefer it blended with lemon balm or lavender. You can even add a teaspoon of raw honey, which itself contains trace compounds that support serotonin regulation. But no matter how you prepare it, the key is not the chemistry, it's the consistency. Because when your brain begins to associate that smell, that warmth, that moment, with rest, it forms a neurological bridge, and sleep becomes easier. Not because of what you took, but because of what you allowed. These days, my father brews his own. He knows the temperature, the timing, the silence he needs. He doesn't need a bedtime story anymore. The tea is the story, and every night he finishes it with the same words, "Thank you. I'll see you in the morning." And he does. Some things can't be healed by medicine. They're healed by time, by patience, and by a warm bowl held in your hands. Maybe it's a spoonful of oats, a green kiwi, a cup of chamomile tea. Not loud, not fast, just a small ritual repeated gently, like breathing. We often think the body is too old, too broken, too tired to rest. But the truth is, the body always wants to restore itself. It just needs a reminder, a signal, a rhythm, a little kindness. I saw that in my father. The man who once lay awake for years now sleeps beneath soft light, a warm mug in his hands. And in the morning, he gets up before me, smiling, saying, "Nothing special last night. Just slept well." If you know someone who's struggling, someone searching for even a glimmer of hope, please share this video with them. Let it be a quiet offering of care. And will you surrender to age, to habits, to fatigue? Or will you choose that first small, warm, meaningful step? And if you're still showing up each day, tell me in the comments what keeps you going even when it's hard. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because here, your story always has a place to be heard. Sleep well tonight, and thank you for staying until the end.